So I'm laughing a little because I really can't believe that I'm starting this talk with a quote, let alone a quote by Lyndon Johnson, even though, we're here in Portugal. He was a former US president, and he came from Texas, the largest oil-producing state in the United States, but he was a strong advocate of wilderness conservation. And he said something like, "For the sake of future generations, we must achieve more than just the miracles of technology. We must also leave these generations with a glimpse of the world as it was created, not just how it looked when we got through with it." So I couldn't agree with that more. I'm a bioengineer. Essentially, I study nature and I try to copy it. I look at the natural world and use man-made processes to build technologies based on nature's blueprints. So more or less, this means I try to leave the world looking unscathed. And these are some of the guys that help me. This desert ant, that iridescence is not a coat of armor. Those are tiny, light-reflecting hairs that keep it cool in the sun. And this dragonfly, those wings beat so quickly because of a protein that has super springiness. You can barely see them move. And mollusks, they use a protein-based glue to adhere themselves to rocks underwater. That glue is so strong they can withstand hurricanes. Now imagine that. Hurricanes can blow down buildings, blow down bridges, but they can't budge a mollusk. Thing is, until recently, we didn't really know how these things worked, let alone were we able to copy them. But now we can. We can study biology at the molecular level and actually build biomolecules. Biology, in my opinion, is probably the most powerful technology on the planet. Self-reproduces, self-repair as you heal, and it reintegrates itself back into the environment. When you consider what nature does elegantly, I think it's pretty humbling. Unfortunately, it takes bioengineers like me and my colleagues a ton of money and a lot of time to try to copy. And we often do it clumsily, and we fail. Now, I'll show you what I mean. Is anyone here arachnophobic? Yeah, okay. Cover your eyes. I know this is a close-up, but this is a tiny spider, actually only a couple grams. She eats bugs. She has a brain the size of a pinpoint, yet every day she spins silks that are stronger than steel and stretchier than spandex. And she can even make them sticky if she wants to. And when she points her abdomen up in the air, she can catch a wind and float that silk all the way across this auditorium. Spider silk is biodegradable, hypoallergenic, and antimicrobial. And it's not just one silk you're seeing. Spiders produce 6 different types of silk from 6 different glands in their tiny body. It's probably the toughest and strongest and stretchiest material we know. Fiber, in particular, fiber we know, and that includes Kevlar. It's also made of protein, one of the building blocks of nature. So here's the question I always get, and I've been getting for years. Where can I get it? Why don't I have spider silk? Can I buy it on Amazon? You can buy anything on Amazon, right? We farm silkworms to get silkworm silk. Why can't we just farm spiders in the same way? Well, this was me trying to do it. Unfortunately, spiders are not team players. I was told back in the day that if I took hula hoops and put them up in my office, the spiders would just make webs in them. For hundreds of years, man has tried to figure out how to get silk from spiders en masse. And this was my attempt. However, over time, as you can see, they left the hula hoops. They slowly made their way around the office, and then eventually they find each other, attack each other, and kill each other. So that didn't work, and I didn't get very far. My interest in spiders came about a decade ago. I was a graduate student at UC Berkeley, working on my PhD in microfluidics. What that means is I was studying microscopic channels to manipulate fluids, trying to condense an entire chemistry lab onto a microchip. Separately, and fortuitously, I was interested in spiders and spider silk. And I really wanted to understand how this stuff works. So I started dissecting spiders, actually cutting open glands. And I learned that the gland is totally unique. Through a symphony of molecular events, the gland creates a liquid protein and then turns that protein into a fiber. In fact, it looked just like the microfluidic devices that I was trying to make for my thesis. So I thought I could copy it. And I did, at least the fiber forming part. But I quickly hit a wall. I needed that liquid protein to test my device. So I went on Amazon, couldn't find it anywhere. So I tried even dissecting spiders again and harvesting the protein. But as I said, spiders are very small. I got very little protein out of them. Turns out I was really naive, and I was operating in a scientific bubble. And after months of searching, with my little microfluidic device on hand, it was about this big, I heard of two guys across the San Francisco Bay who were also obsessed with spider silk. And turns out they were trying to make that liquid protein using things found in nature, like yeast and sugar. But they were in their own bubble. They couldn't turn the stuff into a fiber. So this is great, right? I have what they needed. They have what I needed. So we got together and formed a company. Now, I wish I could tell you that we started with the pure intention of saving the environment. But unfortunately, we just thought these natural technologies were really, really cool. It wasn't till after we formed Bolt Threads that we came across a much bigger problem, and it's this. Our clothes are killing us. How many of you are wearing synthetic fibers? Don't even raise your hands. You're all wearing synthetic fibers. Whether it's your socks or your underwears or your shirts or your bras, you have nylon or polyester on you, and those fibers are great. They are lightweight, they dry quickly, and they're cheap if you don't count the environmental cost of drilling for oil. But they have a huge downside, huge. They never go away. That island of plastic, the size of Texas, floating in the Pacific, a lot of that is your clothes. When your clothes are made of petroleum, they take nearly 200 years to decompose. Think about that every time you throw one out. Or they end up in mountains like this, mostly in developing countries. The world produces 80 billion with a B, articles of clothing a year, and Americans alone throw out 70 pounds of textiles a year. And that's not to mention the lakes of toxic sludge caused by dyeing so that we can keep up with our fashion cycles. Take a look. So that's just the stuff we can see. In 2012, Patagonia did a study that found every time you wash your fleece vest, little tiny microfibers escape from the washing machine, go into the ocean, plankton eat those fibers, fish eat the plankton, and we eat the fish. So there's a great likelihood that we all have little plastic fibers in our stomachs right now. Now that could be inconsequential. We don't know, but my bet is it's bad. What we do know is that this process is not sustainable. So we have two options. As citizens of the planet, we can either try to buck the entire capitalist system, or we can try to harness nature to create clothes that feed the environment rather than destroy it. So that became our goal. Bolt Threads. Spider silk is made of protein, and it decomposes. It turns into nutrition for other microorganisms. Your worn-out yoga clothes could actually feed life. What's more, spider silk is incredibly tunable. We can tune it to decompose in 5 years or keep it preserved for up to 5,000. But this is not a TED Talk. I know I got some nice slides, but this is not a TED Talk. There were no aha moments in this process. It has taken over 8 years of trial and error with a lot of emphasis on the error. But this is how we make spider silk. We start by buying truckloads of corn that are turned into sugar. We feed the sugar to a special yeast that we have modified over years to make spider silk. When you brew beer, you feed yeast sugar and it turns into alcohol. In our recipe, you feed yeast sugar and it turns into spider silk. We grow this in gigantic fermenters the size of grain silos, 5 stories tall, 20 feet in diameter. And this is Toby with one of our smaller versions in the lab in Emeryville, California. We then collect and purify the liquid silk and extrude it through tiny, tiny holes. In this process, you dry it into a solid and you stretch it and you stretch it and you stretch it until it turns into a fine gossamer thread. You can then knit it or weave it just like any other fiber. And in fact, if you take the liquid protein, you can make films or blocks or sponges or biocompatible scaffolds to grow tissues or even glues for wound repair. Spider silk is incredibly versatile, but that is a talk for another day. So can it work? Well, it already does. Last month, the New York Museum of Modern Art had an exhibition called The Future of Fashion that featured this dress. It was designed by Stella McCartney. It's made from 100% spider silk that we created in our laboratory in Emeryville, California. That's right outside San Francisco. It started as sugar, and now I'd say it's a work of art. But these are early days. It's been just over a decade that we've been able to copy nature's blueprints and engineer the technology to produce garments that feed the earth rather than destroy it. But now that we can do this, it's impossible not to look at nature to keep us looking forward. That desert ant, it lives in the Sahara where it's 120 degrees, and those hairs keep it 10 degrees cooler than the environment. Imagine putting that in your yoga pants to keep you cooler on a sunny day. Or the dragonfly, take that bio rubber and put it in your shoes to give you an extra spring in your step when you're on a power walk. Or the mollusk. This is a close-up image of what that mollusk glue actually looks like. What if we held all our clothes together with a non-toxic, biodegradable adhesive? So the old expression was, better living through chemistry. That was coined by DuPont in about the 1930s, and I think they got it completely wrong. Now we say, or I like to say, better living through biology, but not just biology. Biology complemented with the miracles of technology. And whereas Lyndon Johnson called those miracles, I just called it a shitload of work, but a shitload of work that could have an enormous payoff. By learning how to copy nature's blueprints, we now have a way forward, and it's a way that may actually allow us to leave the Earth as it was when we got here. Thank you.